My first break before Star Trek, I was working at a company called New World Pictures, which specializes in independent films. And I was working in the international servicing departments, shipping prints and tapes around the world to people that would buy films for their territories. My boss at the time started dating a man named Toby Halicki, or H.B. Halicki as his title, as his credit would read. And he was the man responsible for the original movie Gone in 60 Seconds, which was made in, I think, 1974. Toby was a car thief. Toby financed the original Gone in 60 Seconds. He told me this, and the guys around him told me this, by stealing cars. Stole cars, financed the movie himself for like 100 and change, 150,000, something like that in 74. He was a maniac. He was like an uber guerrilla filmmaker that would literally do things like take a bunch of cones and some cars and go down to Long Beach and block off the road and do a stunt and then pick up all the cones and get away before the police showed up. And he did this whole movie, distributed it himself, he financed it himself, put it out there in the days when you could really do that as an independent filmmaker, and it made millions. It made millions internationally for him. And it was all his. So it made him an instant millionaire and a minor sort of cult figure in certain car circles. It was about a specific Ford Mustang that people just went crazy for. And years later, he decides he wants to do a sequel. He wants to do Gone in 60 Seconds 2. So he's dating my boss, he's looking for a writer, and my boss knows that I want to be a writer, and I haven't gotten a break yet, so she hooks us up. And I agreed to come on and help him write the script and also be a co-producer on the script, and this was going to be my big break. Toby was completely out of his mind. I mean, he was like a screamer, and he was one of these guys that liked to sue people. He was very litigious. He would sue people at the drop of a hat. He didn't use a lawyer. He would file all the papers himself. If he couldn't park his car at the Marriott Hotel where he wanted to park it, he would then sue the Marriott Corporation and send them letter after letter after letter until they would finally send him some money to shut him up and send him away. And I was like helping him do this because that was part of my duties. And so I'm helping him write this script that he was sending pages over to my office periodically. And the story was going to be, his character's name was Mandrian Pace. And Mandrian Pace is hired by a mysterious cartel to steal several exotic cars from around the world, like from a boxcar in Moscow and from a sheik's palace in Saudi Arabia, and all these like wild exotic locations where Mandrian had to go in and steal a car, but it was all a ruse because the last car on the list was a Mercury Sable. And the engine of the Mercury Sable was this amazing engine that was going to put all the oil companies out of business because it was going to get like 150 miles a gallon. And the oil companies had actually hired Mandrian Pace to steal the car. This was the movie. So, but it's like, this is the job I'm writing. I'm trying to do the job. I'm trying to write the script. And at some point, we flew back to upstate New York, where Toby originally was from, to Dunkirk, New York, which is up by Lake Erie. And his family still lives there. Like Halicki Towing is still a thriving business in the city. And we're like scouting locations. And there was a abandoned factory complex that he wanted to do a stunt at. And there was a big old factory complex, and outside of it, or in the parking lot, was this 150-foot water tower and 4 legs built in the teens, much like the Paramount Water Tower out here. And the idea was, Toby wanted to do a stunt where a tractor trailer, in the middle of a chase, of course, because the whole movie was a big chase, would come flying into this parking lot and slam into the water tower, and the water tower would come down and crash into a parking lot full of cars and big explosions and flames and dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. So we're looking at this thing, and it's like, this is a big water tower. And we're talking about how we're going to do this, and Toby says, well, my friends down at the welding shop will, they'll bring it down. And I was like, what, are you kidding? I mean, you're kidding, right? You need, I had no experience making movies. I knew you needed like engineers, you needed like a whole safety crew, that this was like a major thing to bring this water tower down. And Toby, being Toby, starts yelling, and you don't know what you're talking about. I was making movies when you were a kid, and I've never had an accident on any of my sets, and how dare you? And like yelling at each other in this parking lot. And he wins the argument, of course. It's his movie. So we fly back to California. A couple of weeks go by, and now we're like fighting all the time about various issues because it's just like, it's getting crazy. And finally, Toby fires me. And it was a remarkably amicable firing. I mean, he came in, he brought me in and said, you know, I don't think this is going to work. I'm going to have to let you go. And I was like, okay. I was sort of grateful at this point. And we parted ways, and our relationship was such that I was even able to come to him and ask him for a loan to help me get another apartment because I was getting kicked out of my apartment and I needed to get a deposit for a new one. And Toby would lend me the money. I knew I had to pay him back or he would sue me, so it was like, so that was okay. So time passes, and it was right in this interval, about 3-4 months later, that I sold my first professional script to Star Trek. And suddenly my career is taking off, and it's like, I put the craziness of Gone in 60 Seconds 2 behind me. I'm like doing the thing, and suddenly I get this phone call one night from Ron Halicki, who was Toby's brother. And he said, Toby is dead. I was like, oh my God, what happened? He said, well, we were doing the water tower gag. I said, oh no. He said, yep. So what happened was they do the water tower stunt. And the plan was, here's the water tower on these 4 legs. The plan is, cut this leg all the way through, put a fake one in here. Tractor trailer comes flying in, hits the fake leg, and at that moment they had these big cables tied to the top of the water tower running to a bulldozer over here and a bulldozer over there. And at that moment, the bulldozers would chug forward and they would pull the whole water tower over. Okay. Action, tractor trailer comes in, leg goes out, nothing. Doesn't happen. Can't pull this thing over. It was built, you know, in the teens when they built these things to last. So, you know, Toby and his buddies from the welding shop go out and look at the water tower. What should we do? So they decide, maybe we should start cutting this leg. Cut it almost all the way through, put a pin in it, and at the right moment we'll yank the pin and pull the tower over. So they get the cutting torches and they start cutting on the leg. And at this very moment, news crew from local station comes to do an interview with Toby, and they're interviewing him like a tight shot on him, but right behind him is the water tower, and you can see sparks coming off the leg as the boys are cutting away. And Toby's looking into the camera and saying, when this is all over, I'm going to sue the city of Dunkirk because they made me take out a $10 million insurance policy to indemnify the city, and I have never had an accident on any of my sets. And you just feel like the hand of God starting to move somewhere in the heavens. And they stop the interview, and the news crew has no sooner left than suddenly the tower comes down. And the tower isn't actually what killed him, in point of fact. In front of the water tower, there were these 2 telephone poles on either side that didn't have any wire on them because they had taken it all down when the factory was abandoned. But Toby, always striving for authenticity in every way, decided to string wire between the telephone poles so it looked like real. So what happened was the water tower collapses prematurely, and it came down, it catches the telephone wire, and the wire pulls over a telephone pole which landed on Toby's head. And he was the only guy even injured in the entire production. It was an unbelievable case of karma in some weird way that just came back around, and that was the end of this strange tale of Toby Halicki.